We were inspired by the
Hello and good morning to all the delegates and the participants to this conference. As has been mentioned, my name is Talib Mohamed from Kenya, and I'm from the Technical University of Mombasa and the head of maritime training at the Technical University of Mombasa, and also the vice president, Nautical, at the Association of Maritime Practitioners Kenya, which is the formal association of merchant navy officers, bringing together deck officers like myself and engineer officers under one roof so that we can be able to share our experiences and also give advisory to our MET and the maritime industry at large. With the previous presentation that has been done, we have much covered the employability issue. However, I would like to look at it from a very deviant perspective, and that is the engagement between the industry and the academia in terms of maritime education and training, and the current advancements that are within the industry. Looking at the advancements, first we need to look at what exactly is being defined by human resource experts and professionals, some might call them practitioners, in terms of employability of graduates. Looking at two different perspectives, one of the perspectives is the overall graduate employability, which typically bases itself on the outcome. And another opinion or another proposal which looks at the process of the employability itself. So looking at both sides, the outcome and the process that realizes the outcome, we very find that in the outcome, we can tick all the boxes. Every checklist that is there, we can tick them from the perspective of the academia that yes, the candidate has academic performance, yes, the candidate has the technical skills, yes, the personality and the overall character and motivation of the graduate is within the right direction, but in this case, we can be as well ticking the right boxes with an irrelevant template. So what do we mean by the template? Is that, does that checklist match what is being envisioned or set by the employer? So therefore, looking at the process-oriented approach to employability of graduates, we find that the synergy between the higher education institutions and in our case now, the maritime education institutions, whether at the TVET level or whether at the university level, must meet the expectations of not only the regulatory side of it, but also it must meet the expectation of the employer as to the advancements that are going on, and therefore we need relevant skills to be imparted to the trainees so that they can be able to meet the expectation of the employers. For example, in my case, like as a deck officer, when we were training, it was pre-2010 Manila amendments, and basically what was there was, in terms of navigation, is chart work. And when you're going to plan a voyage, you're going to plan a voyage using very many charts. However, then came the industry hype. You know, in the maritime industry, not everything starts with the regulatory compliance. It starts with an industry hype, which is then regulated, so that we can have a harmonized approach to looking at the advancements. Then came ECDIS, and ECDIS came in, And as of now, we have ships which are, the bridge is totally paperless. And therefore, we find that we need skills not only to understand navigation in terms of paper charts, we also need skills in order to execute and perform navigation at the electronic level, and then something else comes in. You have now the generic training for ECDIS, for example, and then you have type-specific training for ECDIS. So you find that for an employer, the generic training as of now does not suffice. You also need to continue on to the type-specific training, which then gives us the broad perspective of what is the most important. Is it regulatory compliance in terms of the STCW Convention and Code? Or is it regulatory compliance in terms of the National Education, Training and Qualification Regulations? Or do we have a synergy between the two? And as practice, my opinion is that we have a synergy between the two. The convention itself, which regulates the competences and the national education, training and qualification for any country, which would now regulate the education bit of it, as Professor Nakazawa pointed it out yesterday, that the synergy is very relevant, and it is the right way to go in terms of employability of the graduates. Why? Because we see with seafarers is that when a seafarer accomplished, a chief engineer, for example, but the chief engineer, when coming back to shore, even in the engineering practice, there will be an apparent de-skilling of that engineer. Why? Because the system he has trained through to the highest of qualifications does not really fit into the shore requirements, and therefore, while he's highly skilled at sea, then his skills becomes irrelevant ashore. So that apparent de-skilling needs to be addressed, because now the environment of maritime industry is actually changing very fast, and this now calls for a dialogue between the industry and academia and also professional associations in order to map out skills, do curriculum mapping for the curricula that is available at the moment in order to address the issue of apparent de-skilling of seafarers. Because if we look at most of the regulations also that you are having in terms of industry compliance, and the good thing with the maritime industry is the word compliance gives a very strong relation between performance criteria, assessment criteria, and the competence. So we find, in addition to the STCW Convention and the national requirements for education and training, there are some class requirements and regulations and some sector-specific which come in very handy in order to help us to map the apparent de-skilling of seafarers once they leave their seagoing careers and coming back to shore, and not also forgetting some other maritime conventions and regulations that are coming in, which at the face value seems to be more theoretical, but however, when we come to compliance, now that is where now we see that actually these seemingly very theoretical conventions, for example, UNCLOS, plays a very great role in terms of particular skills that has to be imparted to a trainee. And therefore, with that, we need to look at the KUPs that are in the knowledge, understanding, and proficiency, and the competence which have been defined by the STCW Convention, not only with the common understanding of the 2010 Manila amendments, but we also need to look at the recent amendments from 2014 to 2018. We have the IGF code coming in, we have the Polar code coming in, and some very subtle amendments that are coming in, very few of them. and also with the industry practice. However, this cannot achieve enhancing potential of employability of graduates without looking at the stakeholder functioning and stimulus when it comes to addressing the issue of employability, addressing apparent de-skilling, and also enhancing skills by upskilling when it comes to crossover from the seagoing careers to shore-based careers. So two key things that are very important. One, infrastructural development, and two, stakeholder engagement. Without these two, then we'll not be able to get to the key issues of running and operations of maritime training institutions. And as we have all known, it is capital intensive and also very expensive to run maritime education and training. And therefore, in order for the ability of METIs and MHIs to be able to function properly, we need to look at resources in terms of monetary allocations. And as one of our colleagues said earlier, it is not the absence of funding, but it is the redirection of that funding to the specific sectors in order to get the funding from the basic MET and cadetships to the mid-level and also to industry research. And thus, the functioning would be in terms of what is the role of the government in funding? What is the role of the stakeholders in order for the academia to produce the graduates that they need and not the graduates that the academia think that is required for the industry, and also the industry to support research. When research is not supported by the industry, then there is no means and the environment for academia to actually go into the skills mapping and also curriculum mapping. And this is a very dynamic process for curriculum mapping and skills mapping, which needs frequent and regular funding in order to bring all the key players together so that we can be able to determine the most appropriate skills at that particular time to satisfy the industry needs and requirements. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.